An immigrant saves a drowning child. The words echoed in Mira Novak's mind like a prophecy she hadn't known was coming for her. She had been many things in her 36 years: daughter, sister, student, refugee, seamstress, survivor, but never a hero, not until today, when the universe conspired to place her on this particular stretch of shoreline at this exact moment as a small body thrashed against the current's merciless pull. The late April wind whipped across Lake Michigan, carrying winter's final breath. Mira pulled her threadbare coat tighter, fingers trembling not just from cold, but from the phantom memory of documents torn from her grasp 5 years ago, papers scattered by similar winds, disappearing like her hopes of ever finding her brother and his family after they'd been separated at the border. She'd made this solitary walk along the Chicago shore each Sunday since arriving in America, a ritual of remembrance, of penance, of prayer. Today, the lake seemed particularly restless, gray waves crashing against the rocks, mirroring the storm that had lived inside her chest since that terrible day at the border. Mira hadn't meant to come this far north along the shore. The path less traveled suited her mood, until the sound reached her. At first, she mistook it for a seagull's cry, but something in the desperate pitch pulled her attention toward the water. That's when she saw it, small arms flailing among the waves, a child's head barely visible, then disappearing beneath the churning surface. Mira didn't remember removing her coat or kicking off her worn shoes. Her body moved before her mind could process fear. The shock of cold water stole her breath as she plunged into the lake, the icy grip seizing her muscles, threatening to paralyze. But something fiercer than the cold propelled her forward, perhaps the memory of her nephew Miguel, who would be about this age now, wherever he was. "Hold on!" she screamed, though the wind swallowed her words. The water fought her every stroke. Mira had learned to swim in the gentle rivers of her homeland, not in this vast, angry expanse that seemed determined to claim them both. Her lungs burned, her limbs grew heavier with each movement, but the distance closed. Just as the small head disappeared again beneath the surface, her fingers grasped fabric, a blue sweatshirt, suddenly weighted like stone with water. Pulling the child up, Mira caught a glimpse of a girl's face, eyes closed, lips blue. Panic surged through her veins, stronger than the current trying to separate them. Wrapping one arm around the small body, she used her free arm to fight their way back toward shore, every inch a battle against nature's will. By the time Mira's feet found purchase on the rocky lake bottom, her vision had narrowed to a pinpoint, her strength nearly spent. She dragged them both onto the shore, collapsed beside the motionless child, and frantically remembered the CPR training from her factory's safety course. Trembling hands positioned themselves on the small chest, pressing down in a rhythm her own racing heart matched. "Please," she whispered, an ancient prayer in her native tongue. "Please breathe." Seconds stretched into eternity. Then suddenly, the girl convulsed, water spilling from her mouth as she gasped painfully back to life. Relief crashed over Mira with more force than any wave, tears mixing with lake water on her cheeks as the girl coughed and sputtered. Dark eyes fluttered open, disoriented and afraid. "Mama?" the girl murmured. "No, little one." "But you're safe now," Mira answered in English, though her accent curved around the words like hands still unfamiliar with their shape. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone must have called for help. As the girl's breathing steadied, Mira noticed a small gold locket around her neck, somehow still clasped despite the violence of the water. The sight triggered a memory. Her sister-in-law Anna had worn one just like it, a family heirloom that had survived their treacherous journey north. But there was no time to dwell on coincidences. A man ran toward them, panic etched across his face. "Sophia!" "Oh my God, Sophia!" He fell to his knees beside the child, gathering her into his arms, his body heaving with sobs. She swallowed water. "She needs a doctor," Mira said, shivering violently now that adrenaline began receding, leaving only bone-deep cold in its wake. The man looked at Mira, really saw her for the first time. You saved her?" Mira nodded, suddenly self-conscious of her soaked clothes, her accent, her otherness. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what had transpired. "I only looked away for a minute. She was just gone." Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. Paramedics arrived, swarming around the child. Someone draped a blanket over Mira's shoulders, asked her questions she answered mechanically. The girl, Sophia, was placed on a stretcher, Her father, Mira assumed, holding her small hand. As they prepared to load her into the ambulance, Sophia's eyes found Mira's across the crowd of emergency responders. "Wait," the girl called weakly. "The lady, she saved me." The paramedics paused. The father turned, looked at Mira with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Please," he said, "will you come with us?" I need to thank you properly." Mira hesitated. Her apartment was waiting, small, empty, but safe. Her shift at the factory started early tomorrow. She had carefully constructed her American life to be invisible, to avoid complications, to survive. But the girl's eyes held her, dark and somehow familiar. "Okay," she found herself saying. "I will come." It wasn't until she climbed into the ambulance, still wrapped in the emergency blanket, that Mira realized she'd left her coat on the shore, containing the only photograph she had of her brother Javier and his family, the only proof they had existed in her life at all. The hospital corridors smelled of disinfectant and artificial lemon, a scent Mira had come to associate with American institutions, clean and sharp, with something essential missing. She sat in the waiting room, hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee she hadn't sipped, watching the minutes tick by on a wall clock. 2 hours had passed since they'd arrived, since the nurses had whisked Sofia away for examination, while her father, who had introduced himself as Eduardo Vega, filled out paperwork, occasionally glancing at Mira as if to ensure she hadn't vanished. She should leave. The doctors had said Sofia would recover fully. Her duty was done. Yet something kept her anchored to the uncomfortable plastic chair, something beyond the lost coat or the strange familiarity of the child's eyes. "Ms. Novak?" Mira looked up to find Eduardo standing before her, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders, but relief softening the worry lines around his eyes. "Sofia is asking for you," he said. "The doctors say she's going to be fine, but they want to keep her overnight for observation. Would you mind speaking with her? She wants to thank you." Mira nodded, rising from the chair, her damp clothes still clinging uncomfortably to her skin. Eduardo led her down the hallway, their footsteps echoing in the sterile corridor. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "When I saw her go under, I can't swim. I was screaming for help, but no one was there except you. Anyone would have done the same," Mira replied, though they both knew this wasn't true. Many would have called for help. Few would have risked the treacherous water themselves. "Sofia is everything to me," Eduardo continued. "After losing her mother, His voice broke and he cleared his throat. "I'm sorry. Today has been—" "I understand," Mira said. And she did understand loss, how it hollowed you out until you became a vessel filled only with memories and regrets. They reached Sofia's room, where the girl lay propped up against white pillows, her skin still pale but her eyes alert. An IV line snaked from her arm, and a monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. When she saw Mira, a smile transformed her face. "You came," Sofia said, her voice raspy. Mira approached the bed, suddenly shy. "How are you feeling, little one?" "The doctor says I have to stay here tonight, but I'm okay." Sofia studied Mira's face with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. "You jumped in the water for me. Weren't you scared?" "Yes," Mira admitted. "Very scared. But sometimes being brave means acting even when you're afraid." Sofia nodded solemnly as if filing away this wisdom. "What's your name?" "Mira Novak. I'm Sofia Vega. I'm 8 years old." She fingered the gold locket that still hung around her neck. "This was my mama's. Papa says she's in heaven now, but she watches over me. Maybe she sent you to the lake today." Eduardo cleared his throat. "Sofia believes in angels," he explained, a hint of embarrassment in his tone. "Ever since her mother passed away 2 years ago. Perhaps she is right," Mira said gently. "My grandmother used to say that coincidences are just God's way of remaining anonymous." Sofia's eyes widened. "That's what my abuela says too." Exactly those words. Mira smiled at the coincidence, though something flickered in the back of her mind, a half-formed thought she couldn't quite grasp. "Sofia needs to rest," a nurse announced, appearing in the doorway. "You can visit again tomorrow." Eduardo nodded. "Of course." He turned to Mira. "Let me drive you home, please. It's the least I can do." Mira thought of her Sunday evening routine, the small apartment where no one waited, the cold leftovers in the refrigerator, the silence that would greet her. "Thank you," she said. "That would be kind." As they prepared to leave, Sofia called out, "You'll come back tomorrow, right? Promise?" Mira hesitated, aware of boundaries, of the temporary nature of their connection. But the hope in Sophia's eyes weakened her resolve. "If your father doesn't mind," she said, glancing at Eduardo. "Of course not," he replied quickly. "You're welcome anytime. In fact," he reached into his wallet and handed her a business card. "My number and our address. Please, I'd like to properly thank you when all this is calmer. Maybe dinner?" Mira accepted the card, her fingertips brushing his. For a moment, something electric passed between them, recognition perhaps of two souls who had navigated loss and emerged, still capable of human connection. "I would like that," she said softly. Outside, the April night had turned colder. Eduardo insisted she take his jacket for the ride home. As they drove through Chicago's streets, Mira learned he was a music teacher at an elementary school, that they lived in a small house in Pilsen, that Sophia loved painting and science in equal measure. He asked about Mira's life, and she shared carefully edited versions: her work at the garment factory, her small apartment, her 5 years in America. She did not mention the border separation, her lost family, the weight of solitude she carried. Some wounds were too private to share with a stranger, even one whose child you had saved. When they arrived at her apartment building, Eduardo stopped the car but kept the engine running. "Mira," he said, her name sounding different in his mouth, "what you did today, I won't forget it. Ever. Anyone would have—" she began again. "No," he interrupted gently. "Not anyone. You." He reached across the center console and squeezed her hand briefly. "Thank you for my daughter's life." Mira nodded, suddenly unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She slipped from the car, returned his wave as he drove away, and climbed the stairs to her apartment. Only then, in the safety of her locked door, did she allow the day's events to overwhelm her. The terror of the cold water, the weight of the child in her arms, the empty space where her coat and photograph should be. She wept until there were no tears left, until exhaustion claimed her. That night, she dreamed of her brother Javier's face, of her nephew Miguel's laughter, of a gold locket catching sunlight as it spun through the air. Mira didn't intend to return to the hospital the next day. She had already missed her morning shift at the factory, calling in with a story of illness that wasn't entirely untrue. Her body ached from yesterday's rescue, her throat raw from lake water and emotion. She told herself the Vega family needed privacy, that her presence would only complicate their recovery, that the strange pull she felt toward Sophia was merely the lingering effect of trauma. Yet by afternoon she found herself on the bus heading toward Northwestern Memorial, Eduardo's jacket folded neatly on her lap, Sophia's hopeful face in her mind. When she reached Sophia's room, she paused in the doorway. The girl sat cross-legged on the hospital bed, a sketch pad balanced on her knees, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Eduardo dozed in a chair beside her, his head at an awkward angle that would surely punish him when he woke. Mira cleared her throat softly. Sophia looked up, her face brightening instantly. "You came." The exclamation roused Eduardo, who blinked awake, momentarily disoriented before his eyes found Mira. "You're here," he said, and something in his tone mirrored his daughter's delight. "I brought your jacket," Mira said, stepping into the room. "And this?" She held up a small stuffed otter she'd purchased at the hospital gift shop, an extravagance she couldn't really afford but hadn't been able to resist. Sophia accepted the toy with reverence. "It's just like the one I lost. How did you know?" Mira glanced at Eduardo, confused. "Sophia had a stuffed otter when she was younger," he explained. "It was her favorite. We lost it during a move." "Then this is a very lucky coincidence," Mira said, smiling. "Otters are excellent swimmers. Perhaps he will teach you to be more careful near the water." Sophia hugged the toy close. "I was looking for rocks," she admitted. "I have a collection. There was a shiny one just at the edge, and then I slipped and the water pulled me so fast." She shuddered, the memory clearly still fresh and frightening. Eduardo stood, stretching. "The doctors say we can take her home today. They just need to do a final check and process the discharge papers." "That's wonderful news," Mira said. "We were wondering," Eduardo said, hesitating, "if you might join us for dinner tonight? Nothing fancy, just a small thank you. Sophia makes excellent enchiladas." He smiled at his daughter with obvious pride. "Papa helps," Sophia clarified, "but I roll them myself." Mira should decline. She should return the jacket, wish them well, and step back into her carefully structured life. But Sophia's earnest face and Eduardo's gentle invitation tugged at something long dormant inside her, a hunger not just for food shared with others, but for connection itself. "I would be honored," she said. 3 hours later, Mira stood on the porch of a modest 2-story house in Pilsen, a bottle of sparkling cider clutched in her hand. The neighborhood hummed with life, children playing on the sidewalks, neighbors calling to each other in Spanish, music drifting from open windows. It reminded her achingly of home. Eduardo opened the door before she could knock, as if he'd been watching for her arrival. "Welcome," he said, stepping aside to let her enter. "Sofia is very excited. She's been talking about you all day." The house smelled of spices and comfort, cumin, chili, something sweet baking. Photographs lined the walls of the narrow hallway, mostly of Sofia at various ages. Mira noticed there were few of a woman who must have been Sofia's mother, a pretty woman with Sofia's same dark eyes and determined chin. Sofia appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron too large for her small frame, a streak of flour across one cheek. "You're here! Come see what we're making!" The kitchen was warm and cluttered in the way of spaces that are truly lived in. Sofia proudly showed Mira the enchiladas ready for the oven, the rice simmering on the stove, the sopapillas cooling on a rack. Eduardo moved around his daughter with practiced ease, their cooking dance clearly a familiar routine. "Can I help?" Mira offered. "You're our guest," Eduardo insisted. "Please," Mira said. "I would like to." In truth, she hadn't cooked for anyone but herself in 5 years. The thought of participating in this family ritual made her heart ache with longing. Eduardo relented, handing her a knife and pointing to the vegetables for the salad. As they worked side by side, the awkwardness that might have existed between strangers dissolved into comfortable conversation. Sofia chattered about her school, her friends, a science project on weather patterns. Eduardo shared stories of his music students and their recital preparations. Mira listened more than she spoke, savoring the simple human exchange as much as the cooking aromas. When they finally sat down to eat, Sofia insisted Mira take the chair at the head of the table. "It's the most important spot for the most important person," she declared. Eduardo set a steaming plate before Mira. "My mother's recipe," he said. "From Oaxaca." Mira took a bite and closed her eyes involuntarily at the explosion of flavor. "It's perfect," she said and meant it. Throughout dinner, she noticed Sofia studying her with curious intensity. Finally, the girl asked, "Where are you from, Mira? Your accent sounds like my abuela's." "Sofia," Eduardo admonished gently. "That's a personal question." "It's all right," Mira assured him. "I'm from Guatemala originally. I came to the United States 5 years ago. Do you have family here?" Sofia persisted. Mira set down her fork, the question touching the wound she kept carefully bandaged. "Not anymore," she said softly. "We were separated." Eduardo's expression shifted to one of understanding, perhaps even recognition. "I'm sorry," he said, and Mira sensed he truly was, that perhaps he knew something of such losses. "It was at the border," Mira found herself saying, the words spilling out before she could reconsider. "My brother Javier, his wife Ana, and their son Miguel. We were together the whole journey, but at the crossing there was confusion, officials separating people. I was processed differently because I was single, no children. By the time I was released, they were gone." She stared at her plate, unable to meet their eyes. "I've searched for 5 years. Red Cross, immigration advocates, online databases. Nothing." The silence that followed felt heavy with shared pain. Then Sofia reached across the table and placed her small hand over Mira's. "Maybe you'll find them someday," she said, "like you found me." Mira looked up, startled by the child's intuitive compassion. "Sofia believes very strongly in fate," Eduardo explained, his own voice rough with emotion. "In connections that are meant to be." "And are you also from Guatemala?" Mira asked him, wanting to shift the focus from her own story. A shadow crossed Eduardo's face. "My wife was," he said carefully. "I was born here, but my parents came from Mexico. Claudia, Sofia's mother, she came later as an adult." Something in his careful phrasing suggested layers to their story that weren't being shared, but Mira didn't press. Everyone had the right to their private histories, the parts too painful or complicated to offer to near strangers. After dinner, Sofia insisted on showing Mira her bedroom. The walls were painted sky blue, decorated with drawings of animals and solar systems. A bookshelf overflowed with colorful titles, and a small desk held neatly arranged art supplies. "This is where I keep my special things," Sofia said, pulling open the drawer of her bedside table. She removed a small wooden box carved with flowers. Opening it reverently, she showed Mira its contents: a collection of smooth stones in various colors, a pressed flower, a small brass key, and a folded piece of paper. "These are my treasures," she explained. "Things that mean something important." Sophia carefully unfolded the paper, revealing a photograph creased from handling. "This is my mama," she said. "And this," she pointed to a young boy in the picture, "is my cousin Miguel. I haven't seen him since I was little." Mira's heart stuttered. The name could be coincidence. Miguel was common. But as she leaned closer to see the photograph, her blood seemed to freeze in her veins. The woman in the photo was undoubtedly Sophia's mother, the same woman from the pictures in the hallway. But standing beside her, arm wrapped around a toddler-aged Sophia, was a man Mira would recognize anywhere. Javier, her brother, and the boy, Miguel, with his distinctive birthmark above his eyebrow, her nephew. "Sophia," Mira whispered, her voice barely audible, "who is this man?" "With your mother?" Sophia looked confused by Mira's intensity. "That's my tío Javier, Mama's brother. He and Abuela and Miguel had to go away when I was little. Papa says it wasn't safe for them to stay." The room seemed to tilt beneath Mira's feet. Her hand reached automatically for the locket around Sophia's neck, the locket she now recognized with absolute certainty. "May I?" she asked, her fingers trembling. Sophia nodded, curious. Mira carefully opened the small gold heart. Inside, exactly as she knew it would be, was a tiny photograph of her parents, Sophia's grandparents, taken on their wedding day decades ago in Guatemala City. "Where did you get this locket?" Mira asked, though she already knew the answer. "It was my mama's. She said it came from her mama, and before that, her mama's mama." Eduardo appeared in the doorway. "Sophia, it's getting late. Mira probably needs to—" He stopped, seeing Mira's face. "What's wrong?" Mira couldn't speak. She pointed to the photograph still in Sophia's hand, then to the open locket. Eduardo stepped closer, concerned. "Mira, you're pale as a ghost. What is it?" "This woman," Mira finally managed, her finger hovering over the image of Sophia's mother. "Claudia. She was Anna, wasn't she? Anna Claudia Novak. My brother's wife." Eduardo froze, his expression transforming from confusion to shock to disbelief. "How could you possibly know that?" he whispered. "Because I'm Mira Novak, Javier's sister." The words hung in the air between them, impossible yet undeniable. "The family I lost at the border, it's Sophia's family too." Sophia looked between them, trying to understand the adult's strange behavior. "Papa?" "What's happening?" Eduardo sank onto the edge of Sophia's bed, visibly shaken. "Sophia, remember how I told you your mama had a sister-in-law, your tia Mira, who got separated from them coming to America?" Sophia nodded slowly. "I think," Eduardo said, his voice unsteady, "she might be sitting right here." Sophia's eyes grew impossibly wide. She stared at Mira as if seeing her for the first time. "You're my aunt? My real aunt?" "I think so, yes." Mira could barely form words through the tightness in her throat. "Your mother was married to my brother Javier. You called her Anna, not Claudia?" Eduardo nodded. "She used her middle name here. After they were separated from you, they were so afraid of deportation. They changed their names, moved frequently. Claudia, Anna, and I met at the Immigrant Advocacy Center where I volunteered. I helped them find housing, get established. Claudia and we fell in love. Miguel stayed with them, of course. He's Javier's son. And my brother? Javier? Where is he now?" Mira asked, afraid of the answer yet desperate to know. Eduardo's expression clouded. 2 years ago there was a raid at the factory where they worked. Javier and Anna's mother were detained. Anna was at home with the children. When she heard, she rushed to find out what happened, left the kids with me. There was an accident, a drunk driver. She didn't survive." Mira closed her eyes against the wave of grief. "Anna gone. And Javier? My brother? Deported along with your mother. They're in Guatemala now. We tried to fight it, but without proper documentation. He trailed off, the immigration system's cruelties needing no elaboration. And Miguel?" Mira whispered. For the first time, a smile broke through Eduardo's somber expression. "He's at soccer practice. He'll be home any minute. He lives with us, with me and Sophia. After the accident with Anna gone and Javier deported, there was no one else. I adopted him legally last year." Mira pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to contain the sob that escaped. Miguel was here, in this house. Her nephew, whom she'd searched for through countless databases and agencies, was minutes away from walking through the door. Sophia moved to sit beside Mira, leaning against her side. "That's why you saved me," she said with a child's certainty. You didn't know it was me, but your heart knew. Like in the stories Mama used to tell, about how love finds a way back home. The front door slammed downstairs. Dad! Sophia! I scored 2 goals today, a young voice called out. Mira stood on shaky legs. Eduardo rose beside her, placing a steadying hand on her elbow. Are you ready? He asked gently. She nodded, though she had never felt less ready for anything in her life. They descended the stairs together, Sophia bouncing ahead. At the bottom stood a lanky boy of 13, soccer uniform muddy, dark hair falling across his forehead in a way so reminiscent of Javier at that age that Mira felt her heart might shatter from recognition. Miguel, Eduardo said carefully, there's someone here you need to meet. The boy looked up, curious, his eyes finding Mira's. For a moment, there was only polite confusion. Then something shifted in his expression, a memory surfacing, recognition dawning. Tia Mira? He whispered, the soccer bag slipping from his shoulder to thud on the floor. Mira nodded, unable to speak. Miguel took one hesitant step forward, then another. They said you were lost, he said, his voice breaking. Papa said you might be gone forever. I found my way back. Mira managed, opening her arms. Miguel crashed into her embrace with the full force of his 13 years, his tears soaking her shoulder as her own fell freely. I remember you, he mumbled against her. You used to sing to me when I was scared. Yes, she whispered into his hair that smelled of grass and sunshine. Yes, I did. Over Miguel's shoulder, her eyes met Eduardo's. In his gaze, she saw wonder, joy, and something else, a recognition of the extraordinary forces that had brought them to this moment, this impossible reunion. Sophia squeezed between them, wrapping her arms around both Mira and Miguel, completing a circle broken 5 years ago. Later, there would be phone calls to Guatemala, tears and laughter shared across thousands of miles. There would be visa applications and legal consultations, hopes raised and dashed and raised again. There would be complicated explanations about families blended by both blood and choice, about the mother Sophia had lost and the aunt she had found. But for now, there was only this miracle, a drowning child saved by an immigrant who never could have known that this act of courage would finally, after years of searching, bring her lost family back to her. Not whole, not unchanged, but found. Sophia had been right. Love had found its way home.